It's not really a surprise. Well, I will say it's a surprise because I can't believe we're already here. But it's not a surprise that the Dusty Baker truthers are out in full form right now on social media. That's not really surprising, just from a engagement is built on the backs of contrarian viewpoints and hot takes and clickbait headlines, none of which we are guilty of. But look, I guess let's start with Joe Espada, because everyone is saying, "Oh, you thought things were just going to get automatically better when Dusty was gone." Well, here we are. Joe Espada is doing the best thing. I think he was making a lot of decisions that I think we on this panel thought made a lot of sense beforehand, and just doesn't seem to be come to fruition on the field, whether it's batting order or usage of guys, using Jose Abreu less and hoping you get more out of him by decreased usage. So if you were in Joe Espada's play, what was like the first major change switch that you would flip, that you would hope would be that first domino that leads to a turnaround here?
I see no fundamental tactical failure or pattern of decisions that you're thinking, hey, Joe Espada, you're overmatched. Or you finally got a manager gig and you're trying to show how smart you are as a manager and you're overmanaging, making these moves. It's really all about the player performance. The Astros are no more 7-16 because of Joe Espada than they lost all 4 home games and the American League Championship to the series to the Rangers because of Dusty Baker. Right, Dusty's greatest attribute as a manager was the players loved playing for him. Many of them revered him. And so as a steerer of the ship over 162 games, that was the best part of Dusty Baker at all his managerial stops. Right, over 162 games, unless there's something really egregious, a manager's tactical acumen or lack thereof, it's not going to swing them. Last year, there were people, right, the Dusty bashers, and they wound up winning 90 games. Well, if they had a manager who wasn't stupid, they'd have won 15 more games. No freaking chance in hell. If whoever the smartest 3 managers were of all time, and you melded them and you got one super duper brain, they won anywhere close to 15 more games than they won with Dusty Baker last year. In terms of Joe Espada, if you want Dusty back, if Dusty'd been the manager so far, would Verlander have made more than one start? Would Ronel Blanco be better? Would Bregman not have been awful so far? Would Abreu have been chugging some sort of fountain of youth elixir, the way he did under Dusty to start last season? So, no, to call for change is part of the fun of being a fan. Right? Generally, who wants to sit back and say, well, just stay the course, right? Keep on grinding. But that Joe Espada is the issue is ridiculous. Before we turned on the big recording machine, right, we noted there's that expression in sports, well, you can't fire all the players, but that the ice is thinning under Joe Espada right now, that would be epic scapegoating by Jim Crane, or if Dana Brown was advocating, maybe we put the wrong guy in Joe Espada. Maybe he turns out to be a poor manager, but that they're 7-16 because Joe Espada is a poor manager. Falderall, I say, balderdash.
I'm with you there. But it is one of those things where you see in baseball, sometimes they will quickly move on to another manager because, they're not going to fire all the players, like you mentioned, Charlie. Sometimes they think maybe that'll give you a shot in the arm. I'm not all for that. I think Espada's done a good job so far with what he's been given, all the injuries he's had to deal with. I do wonder, you mentioned what could be something you would like to see change. I don't even know if Espada would have the power to do something, but I wondered the other day, like Victor Caratini's been pretty good. He's hitting 276. And if Jose Abreu is going to not only be basically the worst offensive player in baseball, but also be a well below average defensive first baseman, is there any thought of maybe put Yiner at first base and start Caratini more often at catcher? And maybe you can plug one of those holes right there. I know what Yiner's only started like 8 games at first base or something like that. But I mean, is he that much of a downgrade from Abreu defensively? He's way better offensively. It's just something I thought about, that it doesn't seem like they want to put Dubon over there at first base because he doesn't have much experience. You got to get something out of your first base spot, especially Loperfido. Not looking like he's killing it in the minors right now, slumping a little bit. I think you got to stop the bleeding. I would seriously entertain that. And with Yiner, I don't hate the idea of moving him to first base. I know it's better to get a great hitter at catcher because there's not a lot of them, but I think you might be able to extend his career a little bit if he played at first base. Just something I would be thinking about if I worked for the Astros.
I think the latter point you make, Josh, is a very good one. It's early in the season, and Yiner's 25. I don't think he's wearing down yet, but he's been kind of flat over the last couple of weeks. Victor Caratini's 30, and the track record's clear. He's not a good offensive player. But if you can't make an substantial upgrade, take the incremental. I mean, basically, virtually anybody would be an improvement over Jose Abreu. I mean, they could raffle it off to a fan every night and put the money in to pay down Abreu's contract fund or the Astros charity arm. And a fan couldn't be all that much worse than Jose Abreu has been so far. The man is batting 68. 68! And the glove work. And let's throw in, he's embarrassed or exasperated. And, it's big-time professional sports. So on the one hand, screw a pity party. This guy's going to get $35 million more when they finally we have to release him and eat whatever's left, whether that's a month from now, 2 months from now, the end of this season. And he's making another $19.5 million next year. But I don't think he's dogging it. He hasn't packed on 30 pounds. Hey, Dana Brown. Hey, Joe Espada. Hey, Jeff Bagwell. Look at the back of Jeff Bagwell's baseball card. Bagwell was awesome until he wasn't. Right. Like Albert Pujols, Miguel Cabrera, and a whole bunch of other guys. At some point, washed up is washed up.
Yeah, and that's where his point, Jeff Bagwell, is like, he was working with Abreu saying, well, it's not like he's forgot how to hit. Well, Bagwell, you didn't forget how to hit either. It's just eventually you couldn't do it anymore physically, and that just might be where we are with Abreu at this point.
We heard the other day about JV telling them that they needed to get, he talked with the team and told them they need to get their heads out their backsides, and that lasted for about a game. This team has had and lost a lot of leaders. We have a kind of attrition of leadership over the past several years. This past season, they lost Michael Brantley and Martin Maldonado. And while we make fun of how precious Dusty Baker acted with Maldi, calling pitches behind the plate, there's no doubt that the team definitely took their cues from Maldi's leadership in the locker room. I guess the real question is, how much does that really, how tangible is that really? And do you think that maybe just the loss of these locker room leaders that have been on the field with them and been in the trenches with them, do you think that in any tangible way contributes towards maybe the disarray they find themselves in, or their inability to get their bearings when they start spiraling like this?
I largely discount it. I just think they've sucked rotten eggs in terms of their performance. The great Maldi, whatever those intangibles actually were, they could carry him because the team was a lot better. So Maldonado batting ninth. If Menza was back here and playing and you had Diaz's bat out, they would be worse. Maldonado, how do you handle Christian Javier the second half last year? How do you handle Framber Valdez the second half last year? How do you handle Hunter Brown the whole year? Right, Hunter Brown's best month as a major leaguer was last April when Yainer Diaz was his catcher. So I'm just not buying it on the Maldi thing. Brantley wasn't around the team on a regular basis. I just think hit better, pitch better, catch better, run smarter. They just have to play better. And, when you're a fan and you're so invested and they've been so lousy so far, I know that for some, they just don't care the way they used to. When you suck, you look lethargic, right? When they shouldn't be doing cartwheels when taking the field. It's a drag. Now, the job is to make sure your intensity doesn't lag, but that they don't care, that they're resigned to the fact the era is over. I'm not going there at all.
No, but I do hear this narrative a lot that people are like, there's no way they have this record of Dusty Baker's managing this team. And I'm like, first of all, there's no way you could know that. And second of all, I don't buy it. I don't see a lot of moves where I'm second guessing Espada. The biggest complaint I hear a lot about is that pinch hitting Singleton late in games, stuff like that. People have problems with Espada, but who else does he have to go to, first of all? Second of all, Dusty didn't have to do a lot of that because the starters were doing their jobs for the most part, and you didn't need to pinch hit for those guys. So we're just in a different place here now to where you can't let Abreu hit in a big situation. It's just malpractice if you do. So I think Espada is kind of limited by his options. And I think he's also showing Dana Brown, like, if you're giving me John Singleton and that's all you're giving me, then I'm going to use him. Whose fault is it if I use him if you're the one giving me John Singleton? There are other options, but they're writing this out. And then one more I just wanted to hit on is Hunter Brown. Like, man, I am getting concerned here. I know his start ended up not being too terrible over the weekend, but I think he gave up 3 runs before he got his first out. It was very reminiscent of, that game where he gave up 9 runs and couldn't get out of the first inning. That they were really counting on him to take a step forward this year, and it's just not happening.
Charlie, are you to Josh's point here? Like, he's saying Joe can only use the players that he has. You can only shoot the arrows that are in your quiver. He's using the mix of players that Dana Brown has put on this team. Are you surprised? We know it's early, but are you surprised that we haven't seen maybe Dana Brown shuffle just a little bit to give him some extra options in some form or fashion? Or is the plight of the farm team just kind of dictating what they're doing right now, which is really just playing with the team that they have?
Yeah, that their prospect base at this point, relative to the other 29 franchises, it's among the weakest in the game. That Loperfido hit the 10 home runs in the first 13 games. It was fair to suggest, I don't care if he strikes out every other at bat. If he comes up here and hits 130 and hits a home run every 10 days, well, that's still an upgrade over what you're getting now. But if they just don't think he's ready, and as we mentioned previously, he's 1 for his last 20 with the Space Cowboys. So piping hot Joey Loperfido, no, not presently. I wish Pedro Leon was a first baseman. He's off to a real strong start at Sugar Land. 25 years old or approaching 26 years old now. But Myers, McCormick, Dubon, are they going to vault Pedro Leon ahead of those guys? They just don't have a first baseman unless they say, okay, throw Loperfido in, and if he swims, well, great. If he sinks, okay, then you send him back down. But that their farm system had them reduced to calling up Blair Henley for a start. I mean, Arrighetti's the Astros' best pitching prospect. Well, he would be the best pitching prospect for hardly any other major league franchises. The juggling with the relief staff where they call a guy up, have him go pitch a game, and then send him down so they can have another arm available. It's just been a turnstile, and they do have talent limitations. Right? Dana Brown could not overhaul a farm system in a year and change to have it with prospects ready to jump to the major leagues. Dana Brown, 2 years from now, Bryce Matthews better be a major leaguer. And if Pena, he's locked down the shortstop position, well, then maybe Matthews is a center fielder. Or maybe next year he can climb into the mix at third base. But there are some questions that the only way they can get positive answers is if their current major leaguers pick it up.
And remember, in 2020, that's when they got penalized to where they lost a first and second round pick for 2 years. Well, it's 2024. Those guys would probably be contributing this many years down the road to where we are now, but they're not there.
We've heard Reggie Jackson say that this team makes decisions with this 5-man committee from a front office standpoint. And on the other flip side of that is we also know Jim Crane is not shy about parting ways with high-level employees, whether it's A.J. Hinch, Jeff Lunau, James Click, Bill Furcus, Sarah Goodrum. So we've had some turnover, towards the top. I mean, obviously, Lunau and Hinch, we know what prompted that. But my question is, we've seen, I've personally seen, I've been in organizations in which there's this decision-making by committee kind of thing. And what happens is lost in that committee is accountability, because if we all make the decision, then who gets blamed for it? So my question is, do we think this committee thing lets some of these decision makers off the hook, or will we see Jim Crane do what we've seen Jim Crane do in the past, which is make difficult decisions even after positive results? We saw him part ways with James Click. He offered him a contract, he offered him, an extension. I'll put that in air quotes because, lowballing someone for a single year after helping you put together a World Series roster, that's a bold move. Will we continue to see Jim Crane make bold moves and maybe hold this brain trust accountable, think tank?
Well, I think it's fair to say they do not have the volume of sharp analytics-oriented minds involved in baseball decisions that they did certainly as Luhnow built up the empire. And then you had the transition to Click, who came of that same bent. I mean, all due respect to all-time great players, Jeff Bagwell and Reggie Jackson, the guy's qualified to be a general manager or to be making the true nuts and bolts decisions of general manager. I mean, you want their opinions in the room and they're cool to hang out with and all that. How many of the guys on the Sugarland roster can Jeff Bagwell and Reggie Jackson name? They certainly don't watch them on a regular basis. I mean, are they going and breaking down video day in, day out? Just look at what Mike Elias and Sig Mejdal are doing with the Baltimore Orioles and have done since they left here. And the Astros, if they could trade everything they have in their organization, from Jose Altuve down to everything in the Baltimore Orioles organization, from Gunnar Henderson down, the Astros couldn't make that swap quickly enough. Or if the Astros had to think about it, it would be a sign the Astros aren't as smart as they used to be.
Yeah, they do things differently now. Like, even just look at what Click did with the bullpen. Like, they didn't used to throw crazy amounts of money at their bullpen when you had Click and Luhnow, but they managed to have a pretty good bullpen. Where you look at it now with what they're paying Presley and what they're paying Hader, and those guys aren't getting the job done. So that's really where it hurts you, because they found a way to be, economical and still have a good bullpen and spend their money in other parts of the ball club, where now they're throwing all this money at the back of the bullpen and it's still not working. So letting go of Click, I don't get it. I mean, we look back at these trades and what Yainer Diaz has turned into and how good Phil Maton was for, Miles Straw, I think, got DFA'd. And I mean, look at the two players you got for him. So it's frustrating to see that, because it feels like they kind of backslid a little bit. And it also feels like, Reggie Jackson, we don't do deals like that, we're fiscally responsible. It just feels like a bunch of ex-ball players patting each other on the back and thinking they're so brilliant. And it just seems kind of arrogant. And I get it. You're going to be confident after a stretch run like this. It's amazing what the Astros have done, but how much did those guys really have to do with the building of this incredible Astros dynasty? Not so much. It's just a lot of former ball players that I think like to sit around and kind of have fun and talk baseball. But is anybody really accountable for anything out of that group? They're just a bunch of former players.
We should include, I think, that with virtually no exceptions, runs end, right?
Yeah.
Nature takes its course. You age out, you price out. You're not going to keep throwing sevens endlessly at the craps table. From the New England Patriots to the Golden State Warriors, right? The Dodgers, except for where winning World Series is concerned, all right, they're at over a decade now, being phenomenal every year. The Braves have won their division 8 years in a row. Right? The Braves won 14 in a row in the 90s into the aughts, just the one World Series. So, would you rather be great for 14 years and win one, or, okay, your window ended after 7 years, but you won two, right? The Astros are in decay phase and they're not going to pull out of it, and it's going to take a little while. Some of that is just the way cookies crumble.
Yeah, I think I was having a conversation with a friend the other day, and you look at the state of the team, it's undeniable that there was going to be a trajectory and eventuality with this team, given they kept shoving every year, kept trading away prospects. The fact that, not that any of those have really even panned out either, quite frankly, at least from the Click era. But you lose 4 high level draft picks for the sign stealing stuff. It's just there was an eventuality to this, but it does seem like there are some bad moves that are expediting that eventuality. Their splash signings really haven't been they haven't really come to fruition. I mean, Jose Abreu's had a good postseason. So I don't want to discount his performance here. Jose Abreu had a good postseason, but he's overwhelmingly been underwhelming in performance. Josh Hader so far has not. I assume he'll get back on track. But even if they had landed Blake Snell, he's getting shelled right now. He's carrying an 11+ ERA. So there's no easy answers, and I do agree that they were headed to the window closing. But it seems like they've made some unfortunate decisions that have seemingly expedited that trajectory and that pace. So that's going to be it unfortunately, this could be it for this episode of Stone Cold Stros. If you listen on the podcast, again, please make sure that you give us a 5-star rating wherever you get your podcast. Charlie, Josh, and I will join you next week. But you don't have to wait that long to get your Houston Sports Fix. All you have to do is subscribe to SportsMap Houston and SportsMap Texans on YouTube, and we'll have some more content during the week, especially on the Texans channels. We're ramping up towards the draft and OTAs, so we'll be covering a lot of stuff there. So as always, go Stros!